My name is Dr. Elias Thorne. I own this property.
Shut your mouth! We have a report of an active burglary with weapons involved. Get down!
I'm the homeowner. My wallet is in my pocket.
Nothing in his hand.
My hands are up.
Hold position. Let's verify that.
The sight of a man in a crisp button-down shirt and moving gloves being forced to his knees at gunpoint on the porch of a $2.5 million estate was shocking enough. But the fact that he was the owner of that estate and that the person who called the police was watching from behind her curtains just across the street turned this from a misunderstanding into a national scandal. What happened on that humid July afternoon in the exclusive enclave of Highgate Hills would expose the deep rot of prejudice in suburbia, destroy the reputation of a woman who thought she owned the neighborhood, and result in a legal judgment that would set a new precedent for false reporting. But before we unravel the layers of this story, I want to know where you are tuning in from. Drop your city or state in the comments below. And if you believe that a person's right to be in their own home shouldn't depend on what they look like, hit that subscribe button right now. Stories like this need to be told because silence only protects the perpetrators. Dr. Elias Thorne was not just a successful man, he was exceptional. At 45 years old, he was the Chief of Neurosurgery at the state's largest trauma center. He had spent 2 decades saving lives, repairing spines, and removing tumors that other surgeons deemed inoperable. He was a man of precision, patience, and immense intelligence. He had grown up in a working-class neighborhood, the son of a mechanic and a schoolteacher, and had worked for everything he had. The purchase of the sprawling Georgian colonial house on Oakwood Drive was the culmination of years of sacrifice. It was meant to be a sanctuary for him, his wife Elena, and their 2 teenage sons. The closing had happened on a Thursday. Elias had the keys in his hand, the deed in his safe, and a heart full of pride. He wanted to start moving some fragile items in over the weekend before the professional movers brought the heavy furniture on Monday. He called his brother, Marcus, a corporate attorney, and his nephew, Trey, a film student, to help him move the boxes of books, artwork, and personal electronics. It was supposed to be a bonding moment, a celebration of achievement. They rented a plain white moving van, not wanting to deal with the hassle of a massive commercial truck for just a few dozen boxes. That decision, innocuous as it was, would be weaponized against them. Across the street lived Martha Higgins. Martha was 62 years old and had lived in Highgate Hills for 35 years. She was the former president of the Homeowners Association and still attended every meeting to complain about grass height and trash can placement. Martha viewed herself as the guardian of the neighborhood. She knew every car that belonged and every car that didn't. When she saw a white rental van pull into the driveway of the vacant house, across the street, a house that had been on the market for 6 months, her radar went up. But it wasn't just the van. It was the men. She saw 3 black men getting out of the vehicle. She didn't see a doctor, a lawyer, and a college student. She didn't see new neighbors. She saw a threat. She saw an invasion. She stood at her bay window sipping her iced tea and watched. She saw them unlock the front door. To a rational person, seeing someone use a key to open a door suggests they have the right to be there. To Martha, it suggested they had picked the lock or stolen a key. She watched them carry boxes inside. She watched them laughing and talking on the porch. She watched them bring in a cooler of water and some pizzas for lunch. In her mind, she began to craft a narrative that fit her worldview. They were looters. They were squatters. They were stripping the copper wiring. She decided she needed to intervene. She marched across the street, her posture rigid with self-righteous indignation. Elias was on the porch, wiping sweat from his forehead when he saw her approaching. He smiled. He assumed she was a neighbor coming to welcome them. "Good afternoon," Elias said, extending a hand. "I'm Elias. We're just moving in." Martha didn't take his hand. She stopped at the bottom of the steps, arms crossed. "I know the owners of this house," she lied. "And you are not them." Elias paused, his hand dropping. He maintained his professional composure. "Well, ma'am, the house just sold on Thursday. I'm the new owner, Dr. Thorne." "I didn't see a sold sign," Martha snapped, "and I certainly didn't hear about any closing. Who is your realtor?" Elias felt the temperature of the interaction drop. "With all due respect, I don't need to discuss my real estate transaction with you. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a lot of work to do. He turned to pick up a box. Martha was furious. She wasn't used to being dismissed. You need to show me a lease or a deed right now, she demanded, or I'm calling the police. Elias turned back, his patience wearing thin but his voice steady. I'm not showing you my private financial documents. You're on my property. Please leave. Martha pulled out her phone. I'm calling the cops. You don't belong here. She turned and walked back to her house, but she didn't just call the non-emergency line to report suspicious activity. She knew that a report of movers wouldn't get a fast response. She needed to escalate. She dialed 911. The recording of that call would later be played in a silent courtroom, and the gasps from the gallery would be audible. 911, what is your emergency? There are 3 men breaking into the house at 420 Oakwood Drive, Martha said, her voice trembling with fake terror. They have crowbars. They are prying the windows open. I think I saw a gun. Ma'am, did you say a gun? The dispatcher asked, her tone instantly changing. Yes, Martha lied. One of them has a gun in his waistband. They yelled at me and threatened to shoot me if I didn't leave. Please hurry. I'm terrified they're going to come to my house next. This was the fatal mistake. Martha had escalated a bias incident into a deadly situation. By mentioning a gun and a threat to life, she triggered a priority 1 response. Police officers are trained that burglary suspects are dangerous, but armed home invaders are lethal. The dispatch went out. Burglary in progress, 3 suspects, armed and dangerous, threatening civilians. Elias, Marcus, and Trey were inside the house, setting up the stereo system in the living room, completely unaware that a SWAT-style response was barreling toward them. They heard the sirens first. Sounds close, Marcus remarked. Then they heard the screech of tires. Elias walked to the front door and opened it. He was met with a wall of sound and fury. 4 squad cars were screeched across his lawn. Officers were behind their doors, service weapons drawn and aimed at his chest. A canine unit was barking ferociously. A megaphone crackled. Exit the house with your hands up. Do it now. Elias froze. For a split second, his brain couldn't process the data. He was a neurosurgeon. He dealt with crises every day, but this was a different kind of trauma. He looked at the officers, seeing the tension in their bodies, the fingers on triggers. He knew that one wrong move, one sneeze, one stumble could end his life. Marcus, Trey, he said quietly, without turning his head. Stay inside. Do not come to the door. I'm going out. Elias stepped onto the porch, raising his hand slowly. Officer, do not shoot. I am the homeowner. That brings us back to the opening moment. The officer, Sergeant Miller, was operating on the information he had been given. Armed suspects, active threat. He didn't see a homeowner. He saw a gunman who hadn't drawn his weapon yet. Get on the ground, Miller screamed. Elias complied. He slowly lowered himself to the wooden planks of his own porch, the porch he had dreamed of drinking coffee on. He lay face down, spreading his arms. I am Dr. Elias Thorne, he repeated clearly. My wallet is in my back right pocket. The key to this house is in my front left pocket. There are no weapons. We are moving in. Sergeant Miller approached with his team. They swarmed the porch. Miller placed a knee in Elias's back, cuffing him tightly. Clear the house, Miller shouted. 2 officers rushed past Elias, guns up, kicking the front door fully open. Inside, they found Marcus and Trey standing in the middle of the living room, hands in the air, looking terrified. On the ground, now! The officers forced Marcus, a senior partner at a law firm, and Trey, a 19-year-old student, onto the hardwood floor. They searched them for weapons. They found nothing. No guns, no crowbars, just iPhones and a set of car keys. Back on the porch, Elias was being hauled to his feet. Where is the weapon? Sergeant Miller demanded, patting him down aggressively. There is no weapon, Elias said, his voice cold with fury. I told you. I own this house. Look at the moving boxes. Look at the pizza. Miller looked around. He saw the boxes labeled master bedroom and library. He saw the Papa John's boxes on the cooler. He saw the lack of forced entry. No broken glass, no pry marks on the door frame. The cognitive dissonance started to set in. The dispatch said, breaking in with crowbars. The reality was guys eating pizza. Miller walked Elias over to the patrol car. We got a call saying you threatened a neighbor with a gun. That is a lie, Elias stated. A woman came over here, harassed us, asked for my papers, and when I told her to leave, she said she was calling the police. I haven't threatened anyone. I'm a surgeon. Sergeant Miller paused. A surgeon? Neurosurgery, University Hospital. Check my ID. Miller pulled the wallet out. He looked at the driver's license. Dr. Elias Thorne. He looked at the credit cards, the hospital ID badge. He looked at the man he had just thrown to the ground. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a sinking feeling in his gut. Stay here, Miller said, his tone shifting from aggressive to uncertain. He walked over to the other officers who had brought Marcus and Trey out in handcuffs. Did you find anything? Nothing, Sarge. Place is empty except for boxes. No tools, no weapons. The kid was filming us when we came in. Filming? Miller asked. Yeah, phone was propped up on the mantel, caught the whole entry. Miller rubbed his face. He knew exactly what that meant. He walked across the street to where Martha Higgins was standing in her driveway, arms crossed, looking triumphant. She expected a thank you. She expected to be hailed as a hero. Ma'am, Miller said, approaching her. Did you see a gun? Well, I saw a bulge, Martha stammered, sensing the shift in the officer's demeanor. And he threatened me. What exactly did he say? Miller asked, turning on his body camera's audio enhancement. He said I better watch out, Martha said, her story changing. And they were prying the door open. Ma'am, the door has no damage. They have keys. The man is a doctor. He owns the house. Martha's face went pale. He's lying. He's probably a drug dealer. You need to check the deed. We verified his identity, Miller said, his voice hardening. You told dispatch there were guns. You said they threatened to shoot you. That is why we came in hot. You put everyone's life in danger. I felt threatened, Martha said, retreating to the classic defense. I was just being a good neighbor. No, ma'am, Miller said. You were filing a false police report. Back at the house, the officers uncuffed Elias, Marcus, and Trey. The apologies were awkward and insufficient. Sorry, Doc, Miller said. We got a call about an armed home invasion. We have to take that seriously. You didn't have to throw me on the ground before asking a single question, Elias replied, adjusting his torn shirt. I want that woman's name, and I want to press charges. We're handling it, Miller said. But Elias wasn't going to wait for them to handle it. Trey retrieved his phone. He had indeed set it up to record a time-lapse of the move, but he had switched it to standard video when the police arrived. The footage was crystal clear. It showed the officers bursting in, screaming, pointing guns at unarmed men. It showed Marcus yelling, "We live here," while being shoved to the floor. It was visceral, it was terrifying, and it was going online. Trey uploaded the video to TikTok and Twitter that evening with the caption, "My uncle bought a house today. This is how the neighbors welcomed us." Within 2 hours, it had 500,000 views. By the next morning, it was the #1 trending topic in the country. The internet detectives went to work. They identified the street, they identified the police department, and most importantly, they identified Martha. A neighbor who had seen the commotion and disliked Martha leaked her name in the comments. That's Martha Higgins. She calls the cops on everyone. She reported a 5-year-old for selling lemonade without a permit last year. The hashtag #the Highgate Hills Karen began to trend. The news vans arrived on Sunday morning. They camped out on the sidewalk. Elias gave a brief statement flanked by Marcus. He was calm, articulate, and devastatingly effective. I spent 20 years learning how to save lives, Elias told the cameras. Yesterday, I almost lost mine because a woman looked at my skin color and decided I couldn't possibly belong in this neighborhood. She weaponized the police to assassinate my character, and she nearly caused my physical assassination. We are seeking full legal accountability. The pressure on the local prosecutor was immense. The audio of the 911 call was released after a Freedom of Information Act request by a local journalist. Hearing Martha lie about the gun was the nail in the coffin. Public opinion wasn't just on Elias's side, it was actively demanding Martha's arrest. On Tuesday, 3 days after the incident, police cars returned to Oakwood Drive, but this time they didn't stop at Elias's house. They pulled into Martha's driveway. The cameras were rolling as Martha Higgins was led out of her home in handcuffs. She looked small, frail, and confused, a stark contrast to the imperious woman who had stood on the lawn demanding deeds. She was charged with filing a false police report, misuse of emergency services, and reckless endangerment. Because she had alleged a weapon involved, the charges were felonies, not misdemeanors. Quick question for you all. Do you think people who make false 911 calls should face jail time or just a fine? Type jail or fine in the comments. I'm curious to see where you stand. The criminal case was just the beginning. Elias, represented by his brother's firm, filed a massive civil lawsuit against Martha for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and malicious prosecution. They also sued the police department for excessive force, arguing that even with the report, the officers failed to conduct a basic assessment before using violence. The discovery phase of the civil trial revealed that Martha had a history. She had called the police 47 times in 10 years. 45 of those calls were on people of color, delivery drivers, landscapers, utility workers, and guests of other neighbors. The police had labeled her a chronic caller in their internal notes, but had never charged her until now. This pattern of behavior was crucial evidence. It proved that her call against Elias wasn't a mistake. It was a lifestyle. It was malice. Martha's defense attorney tried to argue that she was an elderly woman who was genuinely afraid and confused. He tried to play the dementia card, suggesting she might be slipping mentally. But the prosecution played videos of her at HOA meetings from just a month prior, where she was sharp, articulate, and bullying other residents. She wasn't confused. She was hateful. The jury in the civil trial didn't take long. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. They returned a verdict that sent shockwaves through the state. They awarded Dr. Elias Thorne $2 million in compensatory damages and $1.5 million in punitive damages, a total of $3.5 million. Martha didn't have $3.5 million. She had a nice house, a retirement account, and a pension, but she wasn't wealthy on that level. The judgment meant she would lose everything. The court ordered the seizure of her assets. In a twist of poetic justice that no screenwriter could dream up, Martha Higgins was forced to sell her home on Oakwood Drive to pay the judgment to the man she tried to kick out of the neighborhood. She had to move out. The day the moving trucks came for Martha was very different from the day they came for Elias. There were no friends helping her. There was no pizza. There was just a somber crew of movers and a woman leaving in disgrace, avoiding eye contact with the house across the street. Elias stood on his porch, the same porch where he had been handcuffed, and watched her leave. He didn't jeer. He didn't gloat. He just watched. He had won, but the cost was high. His sons were now afraid of the police. His wife was anxious every time a car slowed down in front of the house. The sanctuary he had built was tainted. But Elias refused to be driven out. He stayed. He hosted a neighborhood barbecue a month later. The other neighbors, horrified by what Martha had done and eager to distance themselves from her, came out in droves. They brought potato salad, wine, and apologies. They welcomed the Thorne family properly. The police department settled their portion of the lawsuit for an undisclosed amount, but part of the agreement included mandatory implicit bias training for all officers and a new protocol for dispatchers to verify details before sending SWAT teams to nonviolent calls. Martha pleaded guilty to the criminal charges to avoid a prison sentence. She received 3 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record. She is legally barred from contacting the Thorne family. She now lives in a small apartment in a different county, far away from the homeowners association she used to rule. The story of Dr. Elias Thorne is a reminder that success, education, and wealth are not shields against prejudice. It didn't matter that he was a neurosurgeon. To Martha, he was just a suspect. But it is also a story of fighting back. By recording the truth, by using the legal system, and by refusing to be intimidated, Elias turned a moment of victimization into a victory for civil rights. He proved that while you can't stop someone from calling the police on you, you can make sure they regret it for the rest of their lives. The viral video of the incident is still used in police academies today as an example of confirmation bias, how officers see what they expect to see rather than what is actually there. It teaches young cadets to look past the dispatch notes and assess the reality in front of them. Elias eventually finished unpacking. He set up his library. He hung his degrees on the wall, and every morning before he goes to the hospital to save lives, he drinks his coffee on his front porch, looking out at a neighborhood that finally understands he belongs there. What would you have done if you were in Elias's shoes? Would you have accepted an apology, or would you have sued for everything she had? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, please share it. The more we talk about these incidents, the less power they have. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. Until next time, stay safe and keep those cameras rolling.